Teves, security analyst for Charles IT. My previous role was in aerospace, and I was in their internal IT over there. So I have a background in cybersecurity, and I focus more on the offensive side of things and vulnerability management and remediation.
Hi, my name is John Flanders. I am a security engineer at Charles IT. My background is varied, ranging from media to a little bit of defense industry, cybersecurity, and help desk, some insurance company. I come with a myriad of certifications in the cybersecurity world, so I am your go-to guy for anything compliance, especially. Happy to answer any questions at the end of that. All right, so we're going to start with the latest cyber threats. Ransomware is generally what tends to make the news. That's where someone will basically take over your network and hold it hostage. Usually the demand is in the millions of dollars. Usually there's a lot of urgency where they're like, we're going to ruin your business unless you pay us. There's a wide variety of ways they can get in, but kind of once they get in, they know they have you, and they use that as leverage to extort money out of the organization. The other threat that is huge these days too is social engineering. People are really your weakest spot with the cybersecurity. The MGM data breach we're going to touch on a little bit later. There was actually one of their help desk employees, someone called their help desk, said, hey, I'm the head of IT, got their password reset. That was, I believe, toward the end of August, and they're still recovering from that because they refused to pay the ransom to get their network back. It cost them, I believe the last figure I heard was $200 million or more just in dealing with this breach, and they refused to pay the ransom for it. The other big attack vector that often makes the news is cyber physical attacks. That's some things like you may have heard of the Colonial Pipeline. I believe this was a couple of years ago. So it's a gas pipeline basically where an attacker was able to get in and hold the entire gas pipeline hostage. There's a risk there of explosions, all sorts of things. So they definitely was a lot of urgency from the side of the company that was attacked to get that resolved. Another big one too, this was years ago at this point, was the nuclear power plant in Iran was taken over remotely and basically just brought to its knees. They actually did some things physically to make the plant physically destroy itself so that it was just unusable after.
To add in a little bit to what John said, cyber physical, they aren't that common. We don't really see it as often. Due to the fact that they're mostly conducted by rogue nations. So countries that we don't really have a stable relationship with, believe it or not, a lot of those groups that are within those countries are often supported by the government itself.
Usually the kind of more everyday hackers, if you will kind of stay away from those type of attacks because usually that will provoke a government response because it's targeting their infrastructure. So some types of threats that are kind of specific to the business world. Generally, there are two types generally of database breaches, which is where they'll get in and get all your information out of your data. They'll either ask for a ransom to not release it, they'll sell it on the dark web. Often it's just that they want to prove that they can get in. The problem is even if you pay the ransom, you don't know what they're going to do with that data. You don't know that they haven't sold it even though they told you they wouldn't. These are criminals you're dealing with, they're not necessarily the most trustworthy people. The other big attack is account hijackings. That's if they will basically use either social engineering or a variety of methods to just take over your account. Then they become you. They may send an email to all your family saying, I'm stuck in the jungle and I need $10 million wired to me, something like that. Or it also can be used to get access to some of these corporate systems for espionage purposes, anything, wide variety of things they can do with that. One big thing that I like to point out that a lot of people don't really realize is a huge attack is it's not always someone on the outside. A lot of security experts that I've been listening to lately is calling this the year of the insider. Employees, by definition of their job, they have access to often a wide range of systems. And it may be that someone pays them off to get information out of it. It may be that they get fired. It may be they don't like the company, something like that. And if it's a defense contractor, then all of a sudden they're selling China our national security secrets. Or it may be that they're selling all of our health information to someone on the dark web. External threats are probably what everyone thinks of in terms of the cybersecurity world. That is where someone from the outside will get into the system, try to either, sometimes it's just to cause damage, sometimes it's just to cause disruption, other times it's to get information, wide variety of different things that they can do with that access.
All right, so this is where we arrive to a really cool part. So on this next section, I'm actually going to demonstrate an attack. You're going to be able to see two perspectives, the attacker and the victim. It's really important because a lot of times people don't understand how does it happen, what's behind it, and how does an individual engage with that. So I'll be demonstrating that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is, this is like what it would look like on an attacker's machine. We're going to be using Kali Linux to demonstrate that. There's a specific tool called SET2, Social Engineering Toolkit. That tool is specifically designed to actually create a type of like pathway to be able to harvest credentials off any user, and it doesn't matter whether it's like to a company or to just any regular individual.
And I'll add to that that it is super, super easy to set up. For someone with a very basic IT knowledge can set this up in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be an expert. It's all pre-built in. It's all just you run it. And that's what I'll show you.
These are open source.
It can be very
tools,
easy to get access to this, and it doesn't involve a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to type it in here. All right, so the next section we have here is as soon as you start up the tool, the first thing that it warns you is it's an open source tool. Do not use it against government agencies. It's for educational purposes. If you are conducting an assessment within a company, make sure you have authorization. That's what we would call to pen testing assessments. They're external assessments within a company. So often enough, these are great tools if you're using it for the right purpose. If you're a malicious individual, it's also can also cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, of course, just because you're agreeing to this doesn't mean that somebody's actually going to not use it for bad purposes.
So the next step with that is, this is the menu you see. As you can see, it's quite straightforward. Of course, if you have the means behind it, you will know exactly how to go about it. We're going to focus on number one. So social engineering attacks, this is what we're going to be able to use to actually get the credentials out of the user. So in the next section, as soon as we hit social engineering, as you can see, there's a variety of different methods we can use. The one that we're actually going to focus on is number three, credential harvester attack method. This is the one that we're going to be able to actually acquire the credentials. All right, so on this section, this is where it gets important. So an attacker will have the ability to either clone a website or actually be able to create one himself and just upload it into the machine. So you can actually have two options here where how you go about things. Often enough, attackers will use a site cloner option, so that way they can actually capture the most up-to-date visual of any website they clone. That's where it gets scary because often enough, people can pick up on a problem solely based on how it looks. This is going to actually skip that. And often enough, if there is not enough security awareness, you can very easily misguide it.
As you can see, it does it for you.
Yeah, it does everything for you. It's more of a automated and manual process. So this is where it gets interesting. So on this side of the attacker view, we're actually going to be hosting the clone website within the machine itself. So for that reason, we're going to actually look up our own IP address. This is the address of the attacker's machine. And we're going to be using that to host the clone website. Once we do that, we're actually going to move into this section. We're going to put our address in here, and this is where it gets interesting. We're going to actually create a server to host the clone website within this machine. And over here, we can choose any website you want. So in our case, we chose Facebook. For a simple example, everyone knows what that is. But you can see how in an attacker, they could actually choose a company's website. And they could very easily clone that. Because the one thing that people forget about is websites are designed in HTML, very known language, also very easy to create. And often enough, if you actually, I don't know if any of you guys have done this, click the wrong keys on the keyboard, you see a page open with a bunch of letters, coding letters. That's HTML language. You're actually seeing the language that builds that website.
And by design, anybody can access any website, otherwise it would be useless. You know,
Right.
so.
So once we hit this, once we actually put in the website to clone, it's going to go through the process of creating a server within the machine to host that website, and we're just basically letting the tool do the work for us. We just wait. The next section, here's where it gets interesting. So for us, we would actually just type that in to actually demonstrate it. This is the IP address of our machine. If we type that in a URL, we would get a Facebook page, login page. The interesting thing is, a lot of times they actually use tools to hide that URL. So let's say you get an email, right? and it has a link, and you click on it. As soon as you go into the link, your first thing you might look at is the URL, and you would see facebook.com. There are tools to hide the numbers behind it and make sure it looks similar to what you would see.
There's a common thing that I keep seeing over and over lately is it'll look like facebook.com, but it's actually acrylic A instead of English A. So it looks like you're going to facebook.com from the visual standpoint. It's often very hard to tell just from a quick glance that that's not actually an A in it, or it may be facebook.in or something like that. You know, so there's a million different endings to the domains nowadays. There's, .dog, .pat, So it may be something that looks very similar. A big one is, there's actually one .co, and that'll be the attack one, when .com is the actual one.
It takes small details so you can catch up to what's going on. If you don't pay attention, you can be a victim. So in this very specific section and related to the attack, this is where a user would see this, whether it's on their phone, whether it's on their computer, they click on the link or whatever it is, and they would be able to see the page and say, okay, well, if he has a nice crafted message saying, hey, you might have an issue with your account, please log in and fix it. Often enough, however that message is designed by the attacker, it could put the victim to, I'm actually going to log in and see if I can address the issue. We used an example here, naive user. We typed that in, we typed our password, and we hit login. Here's the thing, it's a clone website, it's not real, and it's actually hitting a server on our machine that has nothing to do with Facebook. So as soon as the user clicks login, it's going to just simply glitch and redirect them to the actual Facebook page. So this is where it gets interesting. They would see this message. So now they're actually on the Facebook page, they hit a glitch, they try to log in, and here's the funny thing. If they try again, because they're now on the Facebook page, they will be able to log in, so they won't think anything about it. However, in that small second where they typed in their name and password and hit log in, and got this small window, we already were able to actually grab that file off them, where it will contain their username and password. It's as simple as that.
And you would think nothing of it. You think I just typed my password once, that you try again, and then you're in, you think nothing of it.
You won't notice anything until something happens, and you're like, hold up, something happened, I didn't do this. That's how they got the information. And as you can see here, this is a directory created within that server that we hosted for the clone website. It creates a directory, creates everything. So once we had the file, it throws it in there, and we're able to capture exactly the information. This could apply to financial information. This could apply to a lot of different things. And one thing to pay attention to is you say, okay, well, this might be just a small thing. Maybe they hacked my Facebook page. Doesn't matter. I'll create a new one. I'll close it. But there is also the other side of things that we should focus, which is, what if they send that to your company email? And it's really well crafted. You know the individual. You say, oh, I trust this. Let me hit it. Let me click on it. Let me log in with my Office 365 credentials. It's enough for them to be able to get in the system and literally move through your environment and be able to lock things down.
The other thing is, how many, I'm sure you've seen on a website, it'll say log in with Google, log in with Facebook. A lot of people, for convenience sake, will use that for who knows what. I've seen financial services for it. If you log into Experian to check your credit report, you can use Facebook to log in. As soon as they have your Facebook credentials, there's the keys to the kingdom. If they have your email, they can reset your password anywhere. They get your big password reset.
And it's a big focus because all it takes is clicking, interacting with it. This is one example. This is just simply them getting into account. I want to put an emphasis on what interacting means with something like this. As simply as interacting with the link, we're also able to gain remote access of whatever device you have, if it's not safe, if there's not proper security behind it. So the interaction behind it is extremely important to focus on.
All right, so we go into a couple real life cases. MGM has really been in the news lately for they had a cyber attack where they just took down their entire system. I believe the loss is at 200 million last I checked. I'm sure it's higher than that. For a good week or two, people couldn't check into their hotels. Their elevators didn't even work because it's all connected to this big computer system that someone went in and then they held it for ransom. So they held the entire network hostage. Another local example is Eastern Connecticut Health Network, which was actually in the process of selling itself to Yield New Haven, which you may be more familiar with down in this area. So they're a very large health network. Their parent company, Prospect Health, also owns a lot of hospitals in California, across the country. They got hit by a ransomware attack where someone was holding their systems for hostage. They had to actually turn patients away from their ER and divert them to other hospitals in the area. And because the attacker knew that this is like a life or death thing, they were demanding a very high ransom amount. In this case, they didn't have backups that they could restore to. There's not a lot of details public about this one, but a lot of times the attackers will actually go after the backups so that you can't just wipe them out and go back in. This was probably one of the bigger data breaches in this area. They also, I believe it was last week, they announced that 1.2 million, I believe it was, personal health information records were leaked in this, and the attacker sold them on the dark web. That's often something that they will threaten to do as part of this, is that they'll say, now that we have your system, we have all your data, pay us or I'm going to give me your information to the dark web. Problem is, if you pay it, there's no guarantee they won't do it anyway. These are criminals, they don't follow rules, there's no reason for that. If they're already doing something illegal, why not do something twice illegal, which is why the FBI says do not pay ransoms. Insurance companies also will usually not pay out a claim if you pay the ransom, so it's not a spot you want to be in. Basically, there is no winning from a business perspective once you're at that point.
And to add into both of these stories, with MGM is a perfect example of social engineering. You might think, how could that happen with MGM, as they're probably very secure, right? There's two methods of social engineering. One that I showed was using a tool. We actually used the tool to go through a person and be able to get what we wanted. With MGM, we took a phone call. Someone called MGM directly to their help desk, pretending they were the IT department, and said, hey, we need your credentials, something's wrong, and we're gonna address it for you, however that message went. Through that phone call, the individual believed it, provided their credentials, and they were able to just lock down the entire network. Everything that they had access to was just locked down.
Often it's in a minute or minutes because they know time is working against them. So it was a 5-minute phone call. They immediately went in and started locking things down. And the same exact attack actually happened to Caesars, which is another large casino operator. They paid the ransom, which the FBI says don't do. In that case, they're probably not going to be able to recover that from their insurance company. There's a lot of consequences to just paying it, or you need, basically once you're at this point, you need to immediately engage an expert because there are a lot of things that need to happen very quickly in order to protect yourself from a legal standpoint and also to try to salvage your systems.
And it's an interesting area because with MGM, they basically said we're not going to pay, and it puts a company in a gray area because with MGM not paying, they lost so much revenue because they were not able to operate. So they lost more money than if they paid. And then the situation too is if they pay, it puts some sort of message that, hey, if we ransomware, they're going to pay. It's a really interesting area, and the reality is it took a phone call to take down a $33 billion company.
There's actually, I don't have any specific examples. There actually are a lot of instances where someone will get hit and they'll pay. Then they have a target on their back. They know there's someone who's going to pay, so they're going to keep getting hit. So now that I've scared you all, here's what you can do about it. So the number one thing is user awareness. So we offer a product called KnowBe4. There's a million other products out there that will basically send a fake phishing email out to employees, and then it will track who clicks on it so that you know you can follow up with management, you can run reports, you can actually have it automatically send them additional training, things like that, based on who you think is the most susceptible to it. It's a really powerful tool because it really helps with that human element. It also helps not only from an employee's perspective, but also from a personal perspective. When you get that text that's saying, I'm the CEO of your organization, wire me $10 million, you're going to know to think twice about that. So really, user awareness is really just the number one thing that you can do to prevent it. And on top of that, there also are a lot of there are plenty of technical measures that we can take to help to mitigate the impact of it. But the reality of it is that when they have the account of your system administrator, it doesn't matter what controls you have in place, they're just going to go right through them. So, the technical details, I'm not going to bore you with all that, but there are plenty of technical things that can also assist, that can also help with that. So, on top of that, there's also compliance considerations. For security awareness programs are required in nearly every compliance framework. I can't think of a single one that doesn't require it. There also can be a lot of liability involved with these. In the defense space, there's something called CMMC, which is a really big buzzword in the industry right now. Basically, the Department of Defense is saying that just because you're 15 layers down from Pratt and Whitney doesn't mean that your data is any less sensitive. So, it's cybersecurity maturity model. Let's see, it's everyone calls it CMMC, so I can't even off the top of my head think of what the C is. But that is the it's a Department of Defense thing basically for any defense contractors. The big thing with CMMC is that if you make a pencil for Pratt and Whitney, you're just as responsible as Pratt and Whitney for keeping that information safe. Someone who's a little one-man shop, they may not have those resources, but the Department of Defense is basically saying we don't care. It's at the end of the day, national security is national security.
And one thing to touch up on too is if you have a company that falls within any of these compliance, just because you're compliant, you meet the regulations, doesn't mean you're totally safe. This ties back exactly to security awareness. One thing that every company shares that it's a major weakness is human psychology. Social engineering breaks through that. Doesn't matter if you're compliant, doesn't matter if you have all the controls in place, someone can just go through them and take over your organization. So there are two great areas to make sure you're safe on. I have my individuals, they're actually very aware, and also we're compliant with this. As long as you have both areas covered, generally you're safer than any other company, and you become a burden for an attacker to go after you, so you're less than a target.
Another one I really should have put on here is HIPAA, which pretty much everyone's heard of HIPAA, whether you're in the healthcare industry or not. That's basically the government is saying you have to keep patients' health information safe. There are a lot of frameworks and there are a lot of controls that they require, but really, user awareness is the number one thing. I've heard of a lot of HIPAA breaches can often be catastrophic to the business just through the fines alone, even if nothing is actually lost, not to mention the reputational damage, all that fun stuff. The other thing that it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, the SEC actually made a ruling that a cyber attack is considered a material event, so it needs to be disclosed in your annual findings. So for publicly traded corporations, that's certainly a huge thing to think about, because when you have something that you have to file in your regulatory filings, that's a really big deal.